Weight 63 kilograms. Height 5.7 feet. Power of the punch equal to the punch of heavyweight boxing champ. He was capable of breaking the wooden board just from the distance of an inch. He was a magician in the field of martial arts. He played the main role only in 4 movies. But he set such a trend in the world film industry that every hero wanted to copy him in action movies. He lived only for 32 years, but he realized all his dreams in the prime of his life. After all, what was about this man of moderate height that he left such an impression in the world that hardly anyone is unfamiliar with his name? This is Infomakerify, and today we will show the tale of this martial arts king. Bruce Lee earned a big name through tremendous hard work that could be explained from the fact that while practicing martial arts he did not use the routine punching bags, but the special ones that were weightier than used by the heavyweight boxers. It may be the reason that he had half of the weight of the world champion Muhammad Ali, but his punch was equal in force to that of Muhammad Ali. Secondly, Lee practiced push-ups, putting the body weight on a thumb and a finger. He was a master of the martial arts and street fighter of his land, Hong Kong. He had inherited the ambition of becoming a superstar. Father of Bruce Lee was an actor. He had come to the U.S. city San Francisco to materialize the dream of becoming an actor. However, despite untiring efforts, he could not go beyond the level of an average stage actor. 3 months before the birth of Bruce Lee in 1940, he left Chinatown of San Francisco and returned to Hong Kong. But Bruce Lee's father failed to make his name even in Hong Kong. Yet the ambition of the father soon got imprinted on the mind and heart of Bruce Lee. He often accompanied his father to the set. This resulted in Bruce Lee's entry as an actor into the movies only at 6 years of age. Then this series continued. Lee had performed very well in 20 Chinese movies by the time he reached 18. He did not merely act, but he also had a deep interest in dancing. He took part in Hong Kong's popular dance competition, Cha-Cha Champion, and stood at the top. Lee's father wanted his son to achieve big success instead of the petty ones. Learning martial arts became a pride. Being a member of the same society, Bruce Lee too had scuffles every day. Therefore his father decided to train Bruce Lee in martial arts. He sent Bruce Lee to Master IP Man, who was an expert in martial arts technique, Wang Chun. Lee had learned basic techniques of martial arts, moves and its niceties from Master IP Man. Besides AP Man, Wang Chun was also a teacher of Bruce Lee. Bruce Lee's skill in the martial arts and increase in the number of scuffles were going side by side. Many times his disputes reached the police level. Once the police warned Bruce Lee's father of arresting his son if he would have any further fights. This time the parents of Bruce Lee were really worried. They believed they were training Lee in martial arts for defense and as a game and not for fighting others. They decided to send Bruce Lee away from the environment of tussles and scuffles. So they sent Bruce Lee to Seattle, the USA, to a relative who ran a small restaurant. Bruce Lee received education in the daytime and served in the restaurant in the evening. He was getting higher education in philosophy and arts. But his class fellows were impressed by his abilities in martial arts more than his academic performance. Chinese Kung Fu was generally popular in the world at that time. So many Americans asked Bruce Lee to teach them Kung Fu. By this time Bruce Lee had become mature enough to convert this offer into a business. So he began to impart training in Kung Fu in educational institutions. In an educational institution, Bruce Lee met a girl. She was Linda Emery. Bruce Lee and Linda Emery were so attractive to each other that they decided to marry. But the cruel society stood in the way. That was the difference between Lee and Linda for their respective Chinese and American nationality. The parents of both nations repelled intermarriages. But love is blind to the traditions and society solely, and Linda executed court marriage. It was a secret and quietly held marriage aimed not to let anyone get its clue. But after some days, everyone had learned about this marriage. Bruce Lee had also begun to train the Americans in Auckland City of California State. Auckland was housed to many Chinese who disliked any other nation other than Chinese learning their art. Because techniques of this art were very secret, which the Chinese had been preserving over the centuries. They tried to stop Bruce Lee from teaching this art, but he did not agree. In response to this stance, a challenge was thrown on Lee as per Chinese conventions. The critics challenged Lee to fight their leading kung fu master, Wang Jackman. They would allow Bruce Lee to teach kung fu in case of success and abandon training and the trainers if failed. It was a sport for Bruce Lee, so he agreed to it instantly. The fight started. Bruce Lee knocked down his rival only in 3 minutes of the fight. He had won but was not pleased over it. Rather, he was somewhat dismayed and worried, for he cherished high standards. He was annoyed with himself as he wanted to win this contest within seconds. In his view, 180 seconds to win this fight reflected his weakness. He reduced his thoughts into practice. He learned a lesson from this victory which others generally did not get even from the defeat. He took to work even harder to achieve perfection. But this all was not as surprising as his one-inch punch. Bruce Lee was such an uncrowned great king of martial arts that the champions were either his students, or they learned this art observing him training. 3 experts were eminent among them. They were Joe Louis, Chuck Norris and Mike Stone. He received a phone call from Hollywood's legendary 20th Century Fox in 1965. It was called for his audition. Actually, when the Long Beach Karate Tournament was going on. He got the role of a side hero in an upcoming TV series, The Green Hornet. Bruce Lee performed his role as Kato. In the course of that series, Bruce Lee's career came under threat from 2 problems. Both the problems were interesting and amazing. One was about the failure of the cameras to catch Bruce Lee in action. The cameras were meant to shoot human beings, but Bruce Lee was swift-footed like a ghost. The cameras were unable to pick up his quick actions. Therefore, his actions appeared blurred in recording. It was a painful problem for the directors. So Bruce Lee was asked to slow down the pace of his actions to sort out this problem. For example, his punches and kicks would not be at full speed. Therefore, we can guess the actual pace of his punches and kicks was more than what was shown in movies. The other problem was even graver. It was the fight between Bruce Lee and another character, Robin, that Lee had to lose as per the script. Bruce Lee did not want defeat at any cost, even if it was in a movie. Lee declined to perform in that scene. Contrary to that, Bruce Lee threw the challenge of real fight on Robin. The producers tried to persuade Bruce Lee to go by the script. But Bruce Lee, at the early stage of his career in Hollywood, did not agree to it. At last the script was changed to end the fight at draw and without result. According to other actors in the series, Robin was factually afraid of Bruce Lee at that time. He was not inclined to fight with Lee. However, the most interesting fact of the matter was failure of this series. It proved a flop. The Americans did not like this series, so it was wound up after the first season. Bruce Lee once again became jobless after he had a glimpse of his dreams coming true. Unemployed, Bruce Lee had the experience of a series that had flopped, yet it familiarized him with acting skill. This series has proved Lee as a good actor of action movies. On the same ground, he continued efforts to perform as hero in the upcoming movies. But the problem of giving a central role to an Asian in the Hollywood movies stood in the way at that time. It had a simple reason, that was rating. So much so that Hollywood gave the role of Genghis Khan in a film to an American instead of a Chinese or a Mongol. In this situation, Bruce Lee almost had no chance to act. After acting in movies, Bruce Lee had also given up teaching martial arts or kung fu. Now this uncrowned great king of martial arts was without a job and money. His needs had also been multiplied. He had 2 kids, son Brandon and the daughter Shen Li, from the wedlock with Linda. so a friend suggested he train the Hollywood stars to overcome the financial difficulties. By then Bruce Lee had made his name in martial arts. So he began to impart training to the Hollywood stars. Among these stars James Coburn and Steve McQueen were also included. Besides them, the sports stars also began to get training from him. Among them, 7-feet-tall basketball player Kareem Abdul-Jabbar was eminent. Another 4 years had gone and now he was 29 when he got the biggest shock of his life. He had slipped discs during weightlifting when he was exercising in the morning without warming himself up. The problem rendered him unable to do any physical exercise. The doctors declared him unfit to perform martial arts forever. But Bruce Lee least cared what the doctors had said. He took rest for some days and resumed exercise as usual, observing no cautions. These laborious exercises were not easy with back problems. Therefore Bruce Lee spent some months in difficulties. However, satisfying his passion, he practiced physical exercises to the maximum. It goes that Bruce Lee factually wanted to know the extreme potential of the human body. Then amazingly he recovered completely after a few weeks. As per experts in martial arts, Bruce Lee performed even better after recovery than he did before. His performance had much improved, yet he failed to get a proper chance in Hollywood. He was still an instructor when he made a decision that made him a super hit. Bruce Lee became the star from the same foundation that was his major weakness. One day he made a passing remark to a friend, "Bruce Lee may be no more." Why did he say that? His death was a mysterious and controversial story.